Therefore, just as through one man sin entered the world, and death through sin, and thus death spread to all men because all sinned. How many of you are aware of a lot of movies, not usually high grade movies, a lot of movies now deal with pandemics, and they've got some virus bug that they can come from anywhere. They can come from an asteroid that's in outer space and lands on the earth. They can come from a military experiment gone horribly wrong. They can come from spores that were dug up at the Arctic on an expedition, and now with our climate they go wild and they start wiping out everybody on the earth. So there are a lot of movies, the zombie type movies. I mean, my goodness, those things are popular. So all of these things to where viruses, bugs, plagues break out on the earth. Now, have you noticed that in the movies, that typically it starts with one person? And then that one person comes in contact with some other people. Like, don't they always have them getting on a plane? And they have them getting on a plane in the United States, and then they have them flying somewhere in Europe. And they're on that plane coughing and sneezing and hacking all over everybody. And so the plane lands, and all of those people that are on their plane go their separate ways. And because of all the coughing, sneezing, and hacking, they now have this humongous fungus or bongadoo rash or whatever it is. And so they now go to their cities, countries, and then they're coughing and hacking within 12 to 24 hours because these things always operate very quickly. They spread quickly. Incubation time has been cut down because these are superbugs. Doesn't take you 21 days to get this stuff. You can get this stuff in 12 to 24 hours. So it starts spreading, and before you know it, and so then they show the map. And they show the map of, and the red starts spreading. And it's like paint being, just spreading out all over the place. And then they have the news, within 48 hours, the Western Hemisphere will be gone. Okay. So that plague, that virus came in, affected one person. The archaeologist that found the spores in the Arctic Circle. The scientist who first came across the asteroid, he was the first one around it. He caught it, and so forth and so on. Okay. And for some reason, when we watch those movies, we look at them and go, "Oh, I can see that happening. Yeah, that makes sense." Okay. I'm not saying those movies are real, okay? I'm just using them as an example. That mechanism is what happened with sin in real life. In real life, sin came into the earth through one person. And then it spread to all of mankind. It was a plague. You couldn't stop it. There was no immunization for it. There was nothing you could do. It didn't matter how much water you drank. It didn't matter how much sleep you got. It didn't matter how much you exercised. If you were born into the earth, you were born with that plague in you. Nothing you could do. Now, what happened is for a while, that plague lied dormant in you when you were a child. And as you grew older, you came to a point in your life to where you became morally accountable. Some people call it the age of accountability. You came to a point in your life to where you are now responsible for that. And that plague that was on the inside of you, if nothing was done about it, it was going to produce death in you. And by death, I mean separation from God forever. But there was something that happened that gave us an immunization to that plague. And the thing that happened was Jesus shed His blood and ratified the Abrahamic covenant. And whoever calls upon that, whoever accepts that, are delivered from that plague. So, through one person, sin entered the earth. There was one person that came up with the immunization. That one person is Jesus. When you look at it in terms like that, it's easier to understand instead of, I've heard people say, well, it's just not right. Adam sinned, and that's just not right that affected all of us. That's because people look at sin as little s. They look at little s sin, and that is things that we do or things that we don't do that we're supposed to do. That's not what the sin that came into the earth, it produces death. The sin that came into that, remember one of the distinctions that we make that will help you is the sin that we're talking about here with Adam that came in, a lot of theologians refer to that as depravity. That is the depravity of man that entered into the earth. Now that makes sense because when you consider the source of where the sin came from, a fallen archangel, Lucifer, there was going to be nothing good in that. So that plague that came into the earth was depravity for man that produced spiritual death in him. Jesus gives us the ability. Now it's up to you whether you get the immunization or not. It's completely up to you. You're not going to be forced to do it. But if you do decide to call on the name of the Lord, then that delivers you. You then accept the price that He paid and you become justified. Meaning that you have been delivered from sin. You've been delivered from the penalty of sin.